Guys, again, my name is Jason Laddie Travis, the president of the Global Alliance for Equality. Thank you very much for coming out again. 2 nights in a row in the brisk cold to see 2 wonderful documentaries. Antoine, thank you very much for that. I actually cried myself when I saw it first.
Oh, good.
I cried myself to sleep. Because I saw so much of myself in that, especially coming from an oppressive place. I don't mean to speak down about my native land, but as coming from an oppressive place as a gay man from Jamaica, growing up gay in Jamaica in the 80s and 90s was not exactly a red carpet experience, especially for me. And that's one of the Caribbean, and now I'm seeing Africa is trying to outdo the Caribbean in this anti-homophobia stance. There's homophobia reaction for some reason. One of the reasons we do this is to educate the public, is to bring attention to some of the things that we, as individuals, don't realize, because depression is a serious illness that a lot of us take for granted. I tell recently I had an interview with Ronan, with other persons, other journalists, and I tell the story that I sat in a psychiatrist's chair for 3 weeks. And I was just rebellious. I was like, I didn't have a problem. I wasn't abused. Because I didn't understand what depression was. I didn't understand what the bullying was. I didn't understand what abuse is. So that's one of the things that Caribbean Alliance and for Equality does, is to try to expose, especially in the Caribbean, what this whole thing is of tolerance, of abuse, of bullying. I was born this way. There's no need, for example, a common occurrence is to take a machete to somebody because you don't like the way they look. And there's no difference between that struggle and many other struggles that went on before. The reason why somebody ate a Jewish person at some point or still do is because they don't understand that person. Or they thought society say that person is a deviant. The same thing happened to black people. They didn't look, the same thing happened in different other sections of the world. So I think with all that said and done, we are going around the country with documentaries like this just to sensitize individuals as to exactly what's going on out there and to start a dialogue. And I thank you very much, Philadelphia, for coming out and to be a part of that and actually helping us to bring the message out there. And again, Antoine, thank you very much for doing an excellent job. I almost cried again seeing it. I'm going to pass this basket around for a free will offering. I gave out some flyers. You guys are welcome to go on the website and make a donation.
You want to pull the chairs out? Okay. Does anybody have any reaction to the film that we just saw? It's a lot to digest, isn't it? To process. A lot to process. James, where's the basket?
Oh, there should be one over there.
Thank you.
Well, when people start this biblical stuff, I always tell them.
Hang on a second.
Sure, oh, okay.
What's joining us here?
Tony Morris and yourself and
Oh,
myself.
okay.
That's who's joining us.
That's it.
Thank you. All right. Yes, sir. I'm sorry to interrupt.
When people start this biblical stuff, I always remind them that the Bible's been used against everybody, women, gays, blacks, especially black, because they said we're supposed to be slaves because that's in the Bible, and I say, well, it's ignorance. It's total ignorance. So I don't know why people in this day and age believe it. It's just nonsense to me.
And the story in the film that kind of exemplified that most was who shared his experience about who works in a hotel, who you interviewed, Antoine?
Yeah, Alan Jones.
Alan Jones.
He talked about growing up in the church and being called to the front of the church and being told by the pastor that I see homosexuality on you. Wish the floor could open up and he could fall in. Because it's the height of embarrassment in front of his mother. He was being outed in front of the whole church. But I think Ron was recapping at the beginning when we were talking, he was kind of like pulling it all together and giving you ideas of the underlying factors. And I think what is important that the film does, without explicitly saying it, is that here are the underlying factors. Here are the things that black men, black gay men engage in that are symptoms of the fact that they're dealing with depression. So for example, and let me just first of all say this, thank you all very much for coming out tonight, okay? But as black people, one of the potential symptoms that we are dealing with depression is when we show up consistently late for events. I'm serious, think about it. Because you have no sense of, you don't care for yourself and you don't care for other people. So you consistently show up late. And how many of us who have jobs that we show up late every single day for work until we get fired? And then what happens? We feel right back into a cycle of depression, deeper depression. Because we now feel unworthy, we don't feel valued. But in a sense, we have contributed to that sabotaging our own selves. And the film brings out for us some of the underlying things that behaviors that we engage in. The gun here a bit, because later on in the next month that's coming up, my organization is starting 2 programs in New York. And we hope to be able to launch these programs around the country. One is a program for mothers whose sons have committed suicide. A support group for mothers. I can spend the next hour talking about that. And another support group for young black gay men whose mothers have not accepted them for who they are. A support group for them. Just think about that for a second. Because you remember anybody in the documentary saying, if my mother had accepted me, if my relationship with our mothers, yeah, how close our relationship was or still is or would have been with our mothers if she accepted us for who we are. And that would have made a difference in our lives.
And it could have, yeah, wow. Who is the psychologist that talks right after Wilhelmina Stone talks? The white psychologist in the film?
The psychiatrist, Dr. Myers.
Thank you. Michael Myers was mentioning the role of the mother in terms of the life of a man.
Coming from the South, I'm from Jacksonville, Florida. My name is Carlos Carter. It was very difficult dealing with sexuality when there was no father in the home. I was a single parent. My mother, we didn't have sex talks. We didn't have talks about any of that. I didn't have computers to go on to discover what was going on with me. Same-sex attraction was there, but it was so, in the church, we were going into our culture in the black community is that we go to church on Sunday. We listen to these Leviticus and all of these different hell. We're gonna do this. It was like I was introduced to God as a punisher. And so I really took this to heart. And so these things, I couldn't talk about it. I couldn't talk to my siblings about it. I had no friends that were going through the same thing. So it was very isolated. I was very just alone. And it came to a point where I developed a best friend in school, and that relationship was mistook as we were fucking each other. And we were bullied by these older guys that were put back in school. So that was horrific because the teacher that knew this was going on did nothing about it. And so I went through a whole period of just becoming silent. I got my tongue tied. I didn't tell anybody about anything. I wanted out. I tried to go out cutting my wrists. That didn't work. And so I just went through my whole adolescence or teenage years with no one to talk about this whole thing and feeling ostracized and just not worthy. It was a journey. to get to this point now. You know, I facilitate an HIV positive group. I do a men's group for my church. I do a book club now. I'm very vocal. And I had to really go through some things to get there. I mean, I had to listen to elders that was telling me that I was worthy. My grandfather was a big part of that. He showed me love, and he showed me that I was worthy. I had to decide for myself religiously that God loved me for who I was. I couldn't find it where I was.
Bible.
No, there was no one going to tell me there down there, no.
Yeah.
I just really I literally just go on a journey, I think. And I still suffer from depression, I think. I call it sadness. I thought it was sadness. But it's just at times I'll go into a funk. And it's depression. I just lost a best friend. And it's been I'm going through that in and out now. I know how to find inspiration with myself through music, friends, television, or whatever, to uplift myself. That helps so much when I talk to people and interact with them about what it is we're going through. Because it's hard to get black men to talk. It's very difficult to get, especially gay black men, because we have our own culture. Even when I got into the gay culture, there was another reason to be depressed because we weren't really together. There was racism in the gay community. I didn't think I would find that. Then I got to the point where we were in these social cliques. I didn't understand that. I mean, you know, I have this like kumbaya thing, a theory that everybody liked each other and treated each other the same way, that you would want to be treated. But it's not like that. And I understand that. That's sometimes the way things are. And it's a process to get there. And then when I became HIV positive in '86, there again was something to deal with. And so I feel like my mission or what I want to do is to be an example that, you know, always together. I have problems, but I want to share with you, if you want to share what you're going through. Let's talk about it. Let's be honest, let's be clear, let's be authentic about what we're really going through.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, I have wanted to say the image of the pastor preaching against homosexuality really hits home with me. I've grown up first, most of my life in an independent Black Baptist church until the mid-2000s. And in between that time, I went to another church, non-denominational, where the pastor, when she really got to talk with me, she told me that God had told her that I was going to come to that church. That I had, at that time, I hadn't really acted on any of that, just had the thoughts and the feelings. And she said God told her to just give me the word, which of course are the same 7 scripture passages I've heard most of my life.
Condemning homosexuality?
Yes.
Okay.
And I was eventually put out of that church because I've been, all the members at one time or another have been put through what were supposedly exorcisms, and in my case, I had hands laid on me to remove the demon of homosexuality. Ended up coughing up, throwing up some stuff that was supposed to be the demon. I still can't make sense of that, but when I confessed, as we were told to, I confessed to having feelings for one of the male members of that church, and it got back to the pastor. I was eventually put out. It took about where the pastor was a straight Latino man, experienced psychotherapist who I eventually confided in. And he talked me through my feelings. He had learned on his own that God does not condemn LGBT people. He understood the context of the scriptures. He's Greek. A lot of those scriptures don't say what they seem to say when you look at them at face value. The shame of being gay is becoming more and more non-existent. I'm to the point where I'm not gonna personally tell the world I'm gay, but if someone brings it to me, I'm not going to run from it. But it took years and years to get there. I was 42, 43 years old before I realized I can accept myself as gay, because
family court a lot. I help re-socialize boys that have went left when they know they're supposed to go right. Young gay. And I always say, first of all, I want to applaud you for being so transparent and vulnerable to tell your story in this public forum. And I'm 47 years old, and I always say so recently I've been the board chair for the Color Organization. I run a huge organization here in Philadelphia, so I know what you're talking about with cliques and hierarchies and the social thing. Some people might consider my event one of the huge popular events of the year. I never subscribe to popularity, because real popularity, and it's a challenge for me not to be in this venue, because I work with teenage boys that commit violent crime, so I curse a lot. And so, I've been saying to myself and trying to really, the whole concept of if you have to curse a lot, then you're not really intelligent. And so I've been challenging myself to curb the cursing, and so when I see all this, praise him, and so I'm like, all right, gotta tell you tonight, everything you taught, that you're gonna have to live it, so you got to use your vocabulary tonight. So my point is that, I don't care about popularity. I think real popular people don't care about popularity. That's why they're popular. That's number one. Number two, I think the hardest thing when I started volunteering, doing some work at the gay youth organizations, because I'm passionate about, gay youth, and I'm passionate about, the older gay people. Consider myself one of them, and ones that you see that's kind of like fading into the woodworks, that there needs to be this, this bridge, to bridge this gap, because, the younger gays are missing out on the wisdom of the ones that are here, that are above 50 or above 60 years old. And, I say to them, the hardest thing I ever had to do was to come out to myself first. That's the hardest thing you had to do, is say, I think I'm gay. I think I'm gay. Like, well, I had a girlfriend, I got a girlfriend, I'm gay. So when you finally say gay, and Anthony, Big Ant, in the neighborhood they call me Big Ant. Big Ant is gay. I had to say it to myself first. I think it's the hardest thing. You got to pass it to yourself. Then what you do after that, to me, I live my life logically, and even when I do therapy and resocialization, I approach it all, minimize anything that people in here have gone through to the point where they had to go through therapy, because I think therapy definitely is a good thing that's needed in our community. The biggest challenge when I see some of the things that you sent me in the email, I feel like in our community, is because the gay piece, especially if you come from a certain era, I came out socially in 1986, and so everything is such a secret. It's secret. I remember when I couldn't wait for my cousins to leave out so I could play with her Barbie. While everybody was outside. And so on and so forth. So everything is done in such a secret that you learn. I said, we really could be the best FBI double agents around, if you think about it, because we've been conditioned to be that, from the moment that we start thinking like, I think I like Troy instead of Tracy. We already learned how to be, underground, with things. And so the whole piece that I feel is that there's such a lack of nurturing. I got here late, but I've been following him for a couple of years now from New York. You know, the signage was horrible, I gotta tell y'all that. And so, but I'm determined to find this place. I'm determined to be here because if I say I promise to be somewhere, I'm gonna be somewhere, right? And I get the gist of the film, you know what I mean? And the reality of this is what I face with a lot of young people, especially these, you know, these popular kids and so on and so forth. I'm like, you keep buying into the thing that everybody got their assets on their ass is popular or is successful. And when I do my social groups with these young people and so on and so forth, they didn't even know within 2 weeks. It's a difference between having a group conversation about Beyonce versus Kelly Rowland or whoever else, as opposed to talking about nurturing, the hurt. When the last time did you cry? Your relationship with your family. How do we empower our young people to be able to pick up a surrogate family? Because sometimes your parents just won't get it. And they need to hear your story because they need to understand that hopefully if you hear my story, it won't take you 30 years to get to it because I've already paid the price for you. 7 girl be 48 years old. I can't believe it. I am. And I'm proud of it. And saying that we as the older gay men in this society, we have to be visual because we have to show them how to age gracefully and how we still sexy at a certain age and we still got. Freshmen are coming out in April. So they will come out in April, it's hot for them, everybody want to know who they are and so on and so forth. And by the time everybody, it doesn't necessarily mean you slept with everybody, but by the time you have gotten around, everybody know who you are and went through the summer, it's still hot for you, by the time the fall, September come, everybody like, oh child, that's Herbert or whatever. You know what I mean? And that takes a lot out of some of these young people. And it's depressing. It really is. It's depressing. When we sat down at that table and you didn't reach some of the things you thought you was going to reach. So one, you gay, right? And then two, you are kind of like having the same fears and anxieties as we're going to call it the average hetero person would have when you're about 22 and everybody went to college from 17 to 21 and graduated. You can't help but, we are a society that compares. So you can't help but to compare yourself to this person. Now add gay to it, and you didn't do what you're supposed to do. You just went up and down the strip playing and being hot and having pets in your ass out and stuff like that, right? And you realize I wasted time.
The interviewees, Antoine, mentioned that them not having meaningful relationships. This was a point that O'Brien Dennis mentioned when he talked about having multiple partners, at least 100. Definitely gave what he said that they were not meaningful. The relationships that he was having, it was not meaningful. It was, to Tony's point, kind of the more materialistic, showing people that, you know, they're gay and they're not ashamed of it.
Well,
there's a difference between doing that and then seeking meaningful relationships. And I think your film, Antoine, was really encouraging the viewer to seek meaningful relationships.
I think there's a couple of things in what you're saying here, and let's take a step back for a second, because I gotta go a little bit back in my memory. You were saying just now, sir, that time immemorial. We know for a fact that in the animal kingdom, there are more than 432 species that practice same-sex relationships. That we know that along the sexuality spectrum, that homosexuality is one. And depending on the gender, it's either fluid or fixed. But I think one of the problems is that today, the 21st century, we have arrived at a slightly higher consciousness or awareness of ourselves through an evolution of civilization and changes in technology. We've become more aware, more attuned to ourselves. Unfortunately, sir, it took 42 years. And hopefully for the younger people, which begs the question, where are they tonight? Right. Okay? But we'll get to that issue another time. But they don't have to go through 42 years before they get it. But my point is that as we come to that recognition and that consciousness and the awareness of our sexuality and our same gender, sexuality, and sexual identity, a new type of paradigm in our relationships. The only thing we have is a heterosexual model. The only thing we know is a heterosexual norm. And because that is all we know, we very often import from the heterosexual norm into ourselves and into our relationships. And I will go back to the days of slavery. that in fact we have become so enslaved and still remain enslaved in that mentality that we have learned helplessness. We have learned not to resist anymore, not to jump. So when Trayvon Martin gets shot, when Jordan Davis gets shot, when Rodney King gets beaten up, unfortunately he's dead from a drug overdose, but that's another story. But when these people get beaten and shot, why don't we react? And what is the message that we are sending to the younger black gay men or the younger black men in our community? And we are saying to them, don't worry about it, it'll pass. You just have to assimilate, you just have to accept. There is that learned helplessness we've become? Just a question.
I got out of the film, for me, a lot of it was about self-acceptance. The feeling a lot of people go through, when I went through, is that I wanted to matter. I wanted to feel some self-worth. I wanted to feel loved. I wanted to feel not ostracized by the people that I grew up with, my community. When I accepted myself as a gay man, I wanted to go into the community and not feel ostracized. When young people, children, when they feel like, what do they want? They want to be loved, they want to be held, they want to be touched, they want to be accepted. The older gentleman in the film, he felt not accepted by his community because of his age. And then, you know, he led him into making choices or behavior that could put him at risk and made him even more depressed. When you become HIV positive, you become even more depressed because you feel the stigma of HIV and your community is ostracizing you again, and you become even more depressed. So you still want to feel worse. When I became HIV, I felt like no one would want me.
But did you want you?
I had to learn how to love me. And that is the key, is when you have to learn to love yourself. And that's the hardest thing to do. When you have to look inside, look in that mirror every morning, look at you and say, God damn it, I am worthy.
And part of that for me is what you said earlier about interpreting the Bible for people who are
Yes.
religious. You had to know for yourself that it was okay. You weren't letting doctrine determine whether you, and that was, I think, every person that Antoine interviewed seemed to have a very strong sense of themselves, right?
Right.
The algebra teacher, then to say what is happening to us as gay black men
Right.
is half the battle and getting to that truth. So everybody in this film did that. That's what was that's what I really appreciated seeing. And then the love. I do want to say to Antoine's point that part of us as a black people's problem, which is a remnant of colonization, is the learned helplessness, the way young people internalize being silent and accepting homophobia and racism. But what a beautiful example, can I just say, that we saw in Tree, was that his name, from DC, when he talks about his family making a festival, he called it, or a dinner to celebrate his coming out. And then the family at that celebration invited other people who were HIV positive. You know, I said, this is a beautiful counterexample to what we see about black people being helplessly, hopelessly ignorant and always being in the closet. What a beautiful example of Tree's story in this film, where we see a loving black family who will take that and say, it's gonna be okay. And not only that, we affirm you, we love you, and we are here for you. I think that's another reason why this film is very important, because we see those loving examples of what is possible.
And it was because of that acceptance to love themselves. How to get them to see themselves in a different light. And when he has groups that see people, examples like him that come there and tell them and talk to them, you little motherfucker, I can talk your language just as much as you can, you know, but I know your journey. I was 13 too. I mean, a lot of young people don't believe that.
I just go back to remember when I was 17 and 16 and what young people hate is to be talked at. That's number one. Number two, it doesn't even, you know, I don't want anyone to misconstrue what I'm saying. It does not stop at young people. You know, I deal with people, I mean, there's a lot of people in comparison to my age that are young. Somebody that's 32 is young to me. Somebody that's 28 is young to me. You know, somebody that's 40 is young to me in comparing to that I'm gonna be 48. So at the end of the day, that need, that nurturing need goes across the board. You know, that's why I didn't want to, you know, get just pigeonholed into that deal with young people. Reason why we bring the young people concept in, because the nurturing that needs to be there. See, unfortunately, a lot of times by the time we get our ages in our 40s and got some gray on us and stuff like that, we've kind of through trial and error found a way to pacify ourselves to kind of, you know, maybe keep it together. These young people are doing a lot of things that is either, you know, self-medicating, weed, pills, sex, or whatever, and there's no nurturing in the community for, you know, like I mentor a lot of young guys, and never no freaky deaky stuff pop off, and we know that's not unheard of. Because I come from, you know, the CBO world where there was case managers that would sleep with a little young hot thing and stuff like that. It's, you know, I believe in talking about real stuff. I don't believe in not talking about the pink elephant that's in the room. I've seen counselors do things that was totally inappropriate. And the bad thing about working in the gay nonprofit world a lot of times is that we actually party in the same places that you see your constituents. So my point is that I want them to understand, like in that particular group, we talk about holding information and sharing information. They will talk about everything else in the God's green earth, but they won't talk about how, you know, they sad because they miss their mom and so on and so forth. And in the nonprofit world, a lot of times, the things they talk about in a group discussion is so, they just scrape the top. I believe in going deep. When you do my group, somebody's gonna leave here with tears. Because, you know, my whole goal is to open you up, but also make sure I close you up within the 8-10 week period. So within that time frame, all of them will honey child and laugh at each other on the strip. And within that 1 week, 3 of them, none out of 15 boys that was in that group, young people, ages 16 to 23, 3 of them had contemplated committing suicide within that week. Right, and they was the most cheery ones, the most popular ones, and so on and so forth. And the thing is, what I was trying to get across to them is that y'all don't really talk about real stuff. Y'all don't really, thank you, y'all talk around, and you don't really go to those real heart feelings, because what do young people do? Child, you bring me down, child. You blowing my high, whatever the case may be, right? But your friend sitting right next to you, and y'all supposed to be like this, was thinking about moving closer to the train last week when he was at 15th Street. That's serious. So when I seen your clip on the internet one time, and it's talking about depression, it really is that serious that they think long-term good friendship is because we all came out and met each other on the strip at the same time. That does not deem, it can start a good friendship, but that does not validate that you have a deep, intense, nurturing, you know, friendship. So I feel like if we can bridge that gap in a sense, my motto is, let's prove them wrong. Meaning, let's prove society wrong that gay men are not just mean towards each other just for sport. We actually can nurture each other. Sure. We actually can provide resources. We actually can learn something from, you know, the elders. I mean, I tell my friend here all the time, I remember him when I came out on, you know, back in the day, 1986, I remember him as an old head. You know what I mean? Like, that's the sexy old head to be quiet, and he kind of like move around quietly and methodically, you know what I mean? And now here I am, 48 years old, and I still see him, and it makes me feel like I'm a 16-year-old boy again, 17-year-old boy again. That's powerful, that we don't have that many interactions in our community, and that somebody like him, who I would love to, you know, walk up to. I did it, this is my 3rd time doing it, but say, I remember you when I was like 17 years old, blah, blah. Never had no real interaction, but, you know, he's an example of somebody I could watch and I could see. I always knew that he probably had a good job during the daytime, and, you know, that he always was conservative and dressed nice like that. So my whole point is that he is the one that can help me avoid those potholes, you know, in the social piece, and teach them how to, yes, you can play on the weekend, but take your ass to work on Monday. That's old school, you know? And if you're hurting about anything, there are people that you actually can go to. You don't have to try to figure out on your own, because somebody's already paid the price. He can tell you, you know, what he went through, how you found some sort of balance with religious and where you still get fed religiously. So I think this film is very important, and if what I take away from it, and what I feel a lot of, is the community is in such need of nurturing. I'm talking about authentic brotherhood, authentic nurturing, authentic, like, yo, it's gonna work out. But it's no freaky deaky like pickleball. You know what I mean? Like, because it's, honestly, that's why so many people are kind of like, you know, or your business ain't gonna be out there. Because my thing is, if you put my business out there, you can't tell nothing that I ain't already told. And that's the mindset that we have to have, that everything is not, "Ooh, come give me some tea, come give me some of that tea," and everything is not that. And so if somebody feel like they telling your tea, they can't tell nothing that you haven't already told or owned up to, or are, like you said, or are working on. That's the most powerful thing, that we are all works in progress.
What do we think of the dramatizations that we saw? I mentioned 5 of them. We had the dramatization of the son and the father who was molesting him. Even in the family issues, whether we talk about homosexuality, that father shouldn't be doing that. And then the mother's reaction when the son told the mother that the father was molesting him, and her reaction.
But isn't that, I wouldn't say typical, but, and it goes across not just the gay world, but in the straight. Isn't that just, it's a serious problem society itself has, especially with the family unit, where you have this patriarchal society where the mother is supposed to be subjected to the husband or what, the father, no matter what. So I mean, I think I see her denial as society's reaction to the family unit. And again, this is all entangled in what I call thought bag religion. The distortion of religion that, boy, you stay with somebody no matter how much this person abused your child or even abuse you. So again, it's the battered woman syndrome that might not have come across in that, for purposes of this documentary, out in there. So I see that in there. And it's also, I think she might also see him as a gay person and accept his, sexuality. So the whole scenario caused her to be angry and upset, and again use her religious background as a front, which is all, it's up to me is awful, but I mean, and hypocritical, but it opens a whole Pandora's box of what really society, and I don't want to say black society, but society in a whole, because it goes across the spectrum.
The way that family members deny.
Because we're not the only one facing that. It's in England. I mean, how do we handle it as a society? How do we come to grips with that? And then we see, the self-hatred as well. That guy older guy.
Okay, yeah, the older gay dramatized story of him.
Did he, do the tea room because he did not accept himself? I don't really think so.
Why do you think he did
it? Because he was mourning the loss of a loved one.
Mourning the loss of a loved one.
I think he did it because he had sexual problems.
Okay,
I
just wanted to
health problems.
Oh.
I think he just felt alone. I think he figured he had rejection. That's what I saw. I mean,
So you don't see it as necessarily a problem, him going to a tea room, like a moral problem?
I don't see the moral problem. I saw the other things around.
Okay.
Because I'm not here to, dispense morality. That's not the whole issue. Because his depression is caused by something else. Because those are just symptoms. Immorality, like, what's his name? The guy who didn't show up to work?
Yes, the professional.
Right.
Who is definitely coping with using alcohol.
Right. That he closed in on himself. And the good thing is
we need to understand the structure of abuse, particularly sexual abuse. We need to understand the dynamics of this. And it needs to be understood that, first of all, someone who is sexually abused, or the abuser, the person who's sexually abused, is not necessarily gay. And the abuser, the person who perpetuates the abuse, is not necessarily gay either. We need to understand that.